Good morning and welcome to Cybersecurity for Small Businesses. Cybersecurity is a growing concern for many business owners, and it's especially now a bigger concern since we're in our new normal. And what I mean by that is a lot of businesses are going remote, including the remote workforce, which opens up a lot of vulnerabilities in your internal network. So this course is just a quick overview of what to look out for when you're managing your network and setting up your workforce to either work remotely or work internally. But you want to set it up in a secure way so that you can minimize the risk of cyber attacks. If you've noticed, and I know right now there's a lot of chaos going on, but hackers are taking advantage of this time right now. There's websites that are popping up that are false websites. There are emails that are going out that are designed attacks, and we'll get into some of that information later on in this webinar. But there are attacks that are happening right now because of the chaos with COVID-19. So it's more important than ever to be aware. All right. So just an introduction, my name is Jeremy Reed. Everybody calls me Jay. I am the chapter of SCORE New Orleans. I have over 15 years of sales and marketing and management experience, and I am certified in network management, as well as some of the processes that they use to develop networks and run businesses effectively. Now, the information that I'll be providing you today is actually provided by these organizations: the Federal Trade Commission, NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They put together a lot of the information on how to use technology safely, the SBA, and Homeland Security. And later on, I'll show you how to get some of this information via the FTC website, where they do provide free publications for cybersecurity and other threat management as well. All right, so quick video. I'll show a quick video from FTC and NIST on cybersecurity.
Cybercriminals attack companies of all sizes. To reduce your risk, know and practice some cybersecurity basics. Start with your devices. Use strong passwords for all your devices, at least 2 characters with a mix of numbers, symbols, and both capital or case letters. And set all your software to update automatically. This includes apps, web browsers, and operating systems. Next, back up your important files offline, like in the cloud or on an external hard drive. If your devices contain sensitive personal information, make sure they're encrypted, and require multi-factor authentication to access areas of your network with sensitive information. This could be a temporary code on a smartphone or a key that's inserted into a computer. Also, think about how you connect to the network. Secure your router by changing its default name and password, turning off remote management, and then logging out as the administrator. Make sure your router is using WPA2 or WPA3 encryption, which protects information sent over outsiders. Cybersecurity should be part of your business routine. Talk about cyber basics with your staff, and have a plan in case you're attacked. Learn more at ftc.gov/smallbusiness.
Okay, so what we just watched was just a brief message from the FTC and the rest of the organizations that help put together the information. And that's just basics of what you should do when you're setting up, whether it's your home network or a small off network. So just to get into cybersecurity basics. There's a saying from like the FTC and a lot of these higher level organizations that says it's not if you'll be attacked, it's when. And that's because criminals are talking in companies and businesses of all sizes. And that's because they see the value in your information. So whether it's personal information for you or personal information for your clients or proprietary information for your business, a lot of cyber criminals have a way of using that information for monetary benefits, whether it's taking the information and selling it on the black market, on the dark web basically, or what they're doing now is called ransomware. Now, ransomware is basically locking up your information and ransoming it back to you, where you have to pay, usually in Bitcoin, so it's untraceable, to get your information back. But if you know best practices in cybersecurity, you'll be able to reduce the risk of cyber criminals infiltrating your system, taking your data, or even ransoming your data off. Now, in the video, they talked about protecting your files. Your files, of course, are where a lot of your information will be kept, will be housed. So they tell you, one of the first things you should do is make sure you update your software. And the reason why you update your software, and this is part of the reason why a lot of companies are going to more that online dynamic, that cloud-based services, is because it's easier for them to update it regularly. Cyber criminals are constantly looking for holes in software. So in turn, software companies such as Microsoft are constantly looking for the vulnerabilities as well, so they can create what they call patches. The patches basically close up those holes so criminals can't get into it. And that's why your software should be updated regularly, because if you have a vulnerability that hasn't been patched, a criminal, cyber criminal, or what they call bad actor, can use that vulnerability to access your system. And again, they pretty much will have the run of everything. And to give you an example, back in January when Windows switched over from facilitating Windows 7, basically doing updates and everything for that, and strictly moved over to Windows 10, they ran across what they call a 0-day vulnerability. And normally NSA doesn't say anything about these things, but they sent out a message saying that they needed that 0-day patch as soon as possible, because it was a very big vulnerability. And with the use of Windows, with the Microsoft operating system, so many people use it, it created a big hole, not only in company software, but in the general network of the country, because so many people use that vulnerability. Use that software. So if everybody has the same software and there's the same vulnerability, that's like a gold mine for bad actors, because they know how to get to your systems. And if you haven't patched it, you're pretty much you're easy to get. You're making it easy for bad actors, basically. So that's what I mean by they're monitoring all the vulnerabilities and the codes and everything, and they'll let us know when to update everything. Another thing you should do is, of course, secure your files. I've worked for cybersecurity companies, and we definitely recommend securing your files on a separate hard drive or cloud drive. And that's because we practice layered security. So if somebody gets into your computer, but your files are actually encrypted on a separate drive, you have a chance of disconnecting the attacker from your actual files. If they're sitting on your computer, as soon as they get on your computer, as soon as a bad actor connects to your computer, they have access to your files. If you have it on a separate device and preferably encrypted, it makes it harder for them to get into your files. And this is important because, like I said, it's led security. The more you deter, the more deterrence that you place in a bad actor's way, the less likely they will be to pursue that information, unless it's information that they find real valuable. And this is where privacy comes into place. You want to make sure you don't let anybody know what type of information you're housing unless they need to know. So if they don't need to know, don't let them know. And if a bad actor doesn't know the quality of information, the more deterrence that you have in their way, the less likely they are to pursue that information, because they don't know the value of it, so they don't know if it's worth their time or not. And so, and it falls down to like required passwords. Passwords should not be something that you share with anybody, and shouldn't be easy to figure out. So, like your dog's name or places you grew up, something that's easily connected to you should not be used as your passwords. And that's because you want to make it as hard as possible for people to access your information. Another thing you want to do with your passwords, or any, and this comes into play anytime that you're using your devices, watch for anybody that may be looking over your shoulder or in close proximity, because there are bad actors who use these techniques to gain access to information. Another thing that is coming up, and a lot of companies are using it, is multi-factor authentication. And what they mean by that is basically you have your username and password, but you add another way to authenticate yourself. So it could be, a lot of companies are using what they call digital tokens now. They have organizations like Zoom and, like Duo and Google that have authentication processes that sends you a token or gives you an app to use that provides a token. That way, when you log into your system with your username and password, your system will ask for that token and you can provide it. It just gives another layer of security. And I know I'm harping on security at this point, and I'll give you some reasons behind that. Part of the reason, and we've seen in New Orleans and really the state of Louisiana before COVID-19 hit, we were hit by several cyber attacks. Well, these processes help not only keep the bad actors out, but if they do come in, it makes it harder for them to navigate. And that's what you want. You want, if they do break in, you want to slow them down to give your cyber team a chance to actually catch them and deter them from what they're trying to do. Now, going into Wi-Fi, which was also mentioned in the video, Wi-Fi is a different medium than actually being plugged in. A lot of people use Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is very convenient, which is a good thing for the way we work in society now, but there's a very big hole in Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi basically sends a signal out into the air to connect to another device. The problem with that is, if you're sending a signal out in the middle of, say, if you're in a coffee shop and you're connected to their Wi-Fi, you're sending a signal out to their Wi-Fi, which normally isn't, which is a public Wi-Fi, which isn't encrypted. And anybody can actually sit in there and capture your signal at the same time. So basically, it's just pulling your signal out the air like a radio wave. And this is why we tell people to use encryption, because if you're sending your signal out like a radio wave and people can pick it up, that means it's out there for anybody to see. It's like writing down your personal information and leaving it on a desk. I can pick it up, read it, and use it to my advantage. Whereas if you encrypt it, and what encryption means is basically it alters a code in a way where unless you have the actual encryption key, you cannot decipher the code. And that's important because if I'm a bad actor and you're sitting in a coffee shop like a Starbucks and you don't have your Wi-Fi, you don't have your signal encrypted, I can sit there, grab your information out the air and actually see what you're doing. Whereas if you encrypt it and I don't have your encryption key, I can grab it, but I won't be able to see anything because I can't decipher the code. And that's what you want. So when you're using your office Wi-Fi, we always say use at least WPA2, which is an encryption method of access. It is a better encryption method than WPA1, and it is current encryption method. Well, that's on your SOHO system, your small office, home office system. When you're in the public, we definitely recommend using a VPN, virtual private network. The purpose of a VPN is to create that encryption tunnel to help protect your information. So if you do have to use a public use Wi-Fi, we definitely say use a VPN to create that encryption. And there's videos online that you can pull up on YouTube about how the encryption works, and there's actually a couple of videos where you can see the difference between being encrypted and not encrypted from a ethical hacker standpoint. Because the ethical hackers use the same technology as a regular hacker. The only difference is you don't steal information or anything like that like regular hackers do. Ethical hackers are like your penetration testers, your cybersecurity experts, but we'll know how these systems work. And like I said, the videos demonstrate if you don't have an encryption, you can see the code that's coming down, and the hacker knows how to read that code. Once you turn that VPN on, which encrypts it, you can you'll protect yourself from the hacker from that standpoint. Now, I'm saying VPNs to use those, and VPNs aren't very expensive. It just depends on which type you have. Some offices have on-site VPN where their employees can connect directly to their server, encrypted, so they can access their files and everything. But there's also VPNs where you pay. And now, I'm sorry, those VPNs are usually based on their hardware in their office. Whereas there's other VPNs that you can use that has a month-to-month recurring payment, which is usually less than $10, $20 a month. But if you weigh that against the risk that you're eliminating or reducing, that $10, $20 a month is very, very useful. Especially since we're asked for personal information a lot of times. And there's times where, like if you're dealing with like a real estate agent or something like that, you have to send them private information. Depending on your situation, you want to make sure that you have some type of secure transmission. So encryption, especially on Wi-Fi, is important. Now, if y'all have any questions, please raise your hands. Let me know. I am monitoring chats and everything, so I can try to help answer any questions that you have. If you want me to slow down and dive into anything specific, that'll be great. I'll be happy to do that. Now, again, it's just, you'll see a lot of things that are just reoccurring themes like strong passwords. Strong passwords are always going to be a reoccurring theme because that's one of the most common ways to access your system. Another thing is train all staff. In cybersecurity, we can have a fully laid out platform, a fully laid out strategy. When I say a fully laid out strategy, our strategies don't just include software and hardware, it also includes the buildings at times. So sometimes, depending on the level of security you need, we'll look at your perimeter, what type of fence you have up, how far it is away from your building, what kind of entryways do you have? Do you need secure entry as far as, do they need a certain a fingerprint scan, or do you need a thumbprint scan so they can get in? We'll look at those different things and have a fully developed security plan. However, the most vulnerable part of your security, regardless of how many things we put in place, will be your staff. And that's because they're in constant communication with the outside world. So if, say, they get a bad email with malware embedded into it, no matter how many security devices we have in place, if they click that link and download the malware, they've just bypassed a lot of security that we put in place to keep the bad actors out. So we always say train your staff to be aware of things like emails that may be fraudulent, bad links, We tell them don't download anything that they are not sure about. And if they have any uncertainty, definitely consult an expert to see if that download, if that software is safe to download. And if all else fails, you definitely have to have a plan. You have to have a plan in the beginning, but you want to have multiple plans. One, of course, is the plan to protect your system. Another thing is business continuity plans. And that definitely falls in the category of things that we need to look at now, especially with COVID-19. A business continuity plan addresses unforeseen things that happen, whether it's cyber attacks, natural disasters, as we're looking at now, global pandemics. The business continuity plan will explain how you shift from your normal day-to-day process to, in this case, go into a remote workforce in a secure and efficient fashion. Now, of course, it won't be perfect to every situation, but it gives you a guideline. And that's one of the things that you want to make sure that you have in your documentations is how the different plans that you need, how we operate, how we secure your system, and how you continue to have business continuity. Depending on your size of organization and type of networks that you need, there's some organizations that have secondary sites for their data and everything to be stored and accessed from. So in our case in New Orleans, we are steady under the threat yearly of tropical storms. If a tropical storm hits like Katrina and it shuts down the city and destroys a lot of the buildings, depending on the type of company you have, you will want to have a secondary site where you can set up your operations, even if it's a skeleton crew just operating the machinery. You want to make sure that you have those things in place. That's part of business security, because you're not only protecting yourself from any bad actors or hackers, you're also protecting yourself from any unforeseen circumstances that can cause disruption in your business. So definitely have a plan. Again, consult a security expert, cybersecurity expert, to help you develop your different plans, from how your systems will be protected to how you create business continuity in the face of any unforeseen disasters or circumstances. Now, to move forward, again with the cybersecurity basics, again you see like required passwords, encrypt devices, multi-factor authentication. I keep coming back to this because this is something that has to be routine. Update your software is something that happens routinely. Some systems like Windows allows you to automatically update. Other systems, you have to have somebody to watch for the updates. Now, depending on how you operate, you can do the automatic updates on systems. In other circumstances, we recommend not doing automatic updates, but having somebody monitor and perform the updates manually. And it depends on the size of your system. And the reason being, even though we're looking at patches and fixing systems, sometimes updates can create other holes that you need to close back up. So you may have your system secure in one way where it's functional and secure. If you do an update, some functionality may fall out, which means that you have to go back and see what settings you had in place in the first place before the update and reset them. And that's why we say depending on your functionality in your business, you want to take that into consideration so you don't just randomly update something and just cause you to lose business continuity. Again, you see secure files, which we definitely hop on. We tell you secure your files, but also create a backup that is not connected to your system. The reason for that, we're looking at precautionary measures. So if you have everything in place and you feel fully secure and a hacker just so happens to find a vulnerability in your system and exploit it, and they give you ransomware, This can be, again, this can be in the form of an email where when your employees clicks on a link, not paying attention, and it infects the system. If your system gets infected with ransomware and they decide to lock up all your files that's connected to your system, without a backup that's not connected to your system, that's not touched by the ransomware, you'll be forced to either start over, or more realistically, you'll be asked to pay that ransom, and it's going to be hard to say you're not going to pay the ransom because they have control of your files. Whereas if you have that backup that's on a drive that's not directly connected to your system, you can actually remove the bad software and bad hardware that's infected, and just replace everything and upload your backups from that file, which has not been touched. Side note, as far as getting rid of all the infected hardware and everything, if it's infected, and this is a roll over into the insurance, because you do have cybersecurity insurance available. If you get infected, do not wipe anything. Consult an expert, and if you have a security insurance policy, consult your insurance agent as well, because sometimes they need that evidence for their records, and if they find out who did it and they want to bring a case against them, they'll need those records untouched. So there's response ways to handle those situations where once you get infected, you can call on a response team and they'll know how to handle that situation where they can keep the evidence intact and still get you back up and running. All right, moving forward. And I have quite a few things to go over today. That's why I'm trying to go fast. But to give you the NIST framework, basically what is it and how does it apply to you? So NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Basically, is an organization that manages all the standards and technology that's used in today's society, so they can give you guidance on how to use it safely. It doesn't matter your size of business or anything like that. They give you general information that can be used at any scale in your business to help you reduce your cyber risk at work. And they actually do have some information online that you can download for free. And I do recommend that you download the information because it's very helpful to be aware of what's going on and what you should do. Also, it helps you helps you to get in practice, so you can constantly look over this information and see what's going on. I'll share that site right now so you can see it. So on the NIST website, not on NIST, on the FTC website, ftc.gov, you can go and actually download this PDF, which is what this course is based on, called Cybersecurity for Small Businesses. And it's a booklet that gives you all the information that we're talking about today, just so you can stay abreast of it. Also, if you have a team, they will actually ship you a couple copies for free. So they ship it in packs of 25. As you can see, you can go up to like 300 booklets. And you can share this with your employees and anybody else that you know that can use this information, because this is free and use, and it should be used for the public. It should be shared with the public, because again, this is not just a single business vulnerability. It's not something that only certain businesses should use. Businesses in general and only people that should use. This is something that everybody should be aware of, because the grand scheme of things, if one business is vulnerable, we're pretty much all vulnerable. If one person is vulnerable, really, we're all vulnerable because we interconnect so often, and that's the purpose of the internet, is interconnected communications. And what I mean by we're all vulnerable, in some business arenas, you'll have contracts. You'll get contracts where you'll work with, say, like Blue Cross Blue Shield, or you'll work with the federal government on different contracts. If you become a vendor and you have access to some of the systems from the parties that you're contracting with, you become a vulnerability. So some organizations, especially in the healthcare industry and the government sector, they'll ask you about your security. What cybersecurity precautions do you have in place? Are your systems up to date? Are you monitoring? And it just depends on the level of information that you'll have access to. And actually, we had a client recently that was getting a contract with a healthcare service, and part of the process of getting the contract was making sure they were HIPAA compliant. Now, HIPAA is the standard for healthcare as far as cybersecurity, and it was important to that organization that whoever they contract with stays HIPAA compliant for not only their company safety, but for their clients' privacy. Because that's where hackers are trying to do. They're trying to get to that private information that healthcare companies have, financial companies have, lawyers have, any organization that houses private information for their employees and their clients. Hackers or bad actors want to get to that information because it's valuable. If I take your information, if I take your client's personal information, again, I can sell it on a black market. I can use it for identity theft. There's a lot of things I can use that information for. So it's important that we make sure that we stay protected. Now, NIST gives you these steps for their framework, which is identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. So when you identify the list of equipment and software and data that you have, we always say do an inventory list of your equipment, because you want to make sure you're aware of all the computers and technology that you're using, and make sure that it doesn't walk off. There are companies that I've talked to that have expressed concern that they have missing computers and things of that nature. If a computer is missing, that's a big problem, because there's information stored on those computers, whether you see it or not. Like if you use a computer nowadays and you go to type in some information on a website, there's autofill that some computers have activated that can automatically fill in usernames, passwords, and other information. If that's not deactivated on those systems, that creates a big risk, because bad actors can take that equipment and use the information stored in there to access the sensitive information that you're trying to protect. And it's not just computers. Nowadays we have cell phones, tablets, all these things that we have at our disposal. A lot of times are used on our business as well as personal, which there are cautionary protocols you should use, like BYOD, bring your own device plans and stuff like that you should use to make sure that it's being used properly and information is secured properly on the mobile devices and everything. But if any of these things have access to your systems and then they get lost, that creates a security risk. So you want to inventory what equipment that you have. You also want to know what software that you're using, because if something happens, say if there's an announcement that XYZ software company has a vulnerability in their latest updates, we want to know if we're using that software or not. We have so many things going on in our day-to-day business lives and personal lives. It's hard to keep track of everything. So you want to make sure you have a list of softwares that you're using. That way, if those announcements come up, you can go to it and say, okay, this software is the one that has the vulnerability. We have to address it. If a software goes out of date, because they're all out of date softwares that no longer have updates and no longer have company support, you want to make sure you know which ones those are and how to address those situations. There's also licensing issues. You want to make sure that your software is licensed by the proper companies and the licenses are kept up to date. So a lot of that stuff is going to fall into identifying, making a list of what you're using. Also your data. We talked about data backups. You want to know where your data backups are. You want to know what data backups go to what systems. Because you can back up just a computer, you can back up your servers, you can back up a lot of things so you can, again, create that business continuity. Another thing, you want to establish roles and responsibilities for anyone with access to your data. You don't want to give everybody access to all the data. You don't want your sales department to know everything that's going on in the finance department. You don't want your sales and finance department to know what's going on in your human resources department, because that's all information that is sensitive, but it's not necessary that the sales department needs to see what's in the HR department, because it has nothing to do with their effectiveness of doing their job. So you want to create those roles and responsibilities within your system so that your employees can only get access to information that they need. Another reason for that is if you have a disgruntled employee. We've all seen disgruntled employees. Sometimes they're justified, a lot of times they aren't, but some disgruntled employees have a tendency to try to get back at their employers and their companies that they're currently with or planning on leaving. So you want to make sure you keep track of who has what access to what information. That way, if something happens, such as a data breach, it's easier for you to track who or what was the cause of that breach. Of course, lastly, steps to protect against attacks. You want to identify what steps you're taking. Are you going to go with simple firewall and antivirus system, or are you going to get a little bit more robust with key card scanners, tokens, digital tokens, and things like that to make it a little bit harder for people to get into your system? Another things to look at is if you have a physical brick and mortar location, are there any internet ports or plugs that are not being used at that time? So if I walk into your office and I see computers all around and everybody's wired in to the network, but I see a random internet outlet that's not being utilized, can I use that outlet to access your system? If I can, that's a big problem. If I can't, that's good. You only want to have those ports active on the computers that are actually using them. That way, if anybody walks in, they can't just plug in devices and hack them. And I can say this from experience, there are devices that are very small that can hack systems. Like, it can fit in the palm of your hand. There's a device called a Raspberry Pi that's the size of a credit card that you can use and set up as a tool to take advantage of vulnerabilities in different network systems. And it's basically a mini computer. There's also software that you can add to different specific cell phones that can act the same way, but that's more on a wireless level versus the hardline plug. But going over to protect, these are just a list of things that you should do to protect your system. Again, control who logs into your networking devices. If they shouldn't have access, they don't give them access. If they're in the sales department, they should only be able to log into the sales side of your system. Same thing with HR, finance. There should be a limited number of people that can access your full system. And that's usually C-level employees, your owners, your top-level managers, and of course your IT manager. And that's because you want to limit the scope of your vulnerability. Of course, use security software, viruses. Now, there's different levels of antivirus. There's your traditional antivirus, and that basically looks at viruses that we're aware of. There's code signatures that we have on file that they have a database of, that these antiviruses look to make sure that they're up to date, make sure that they can stay abreast of the different type of viruses that are out there. Unfortunately, these traditional antivirus systems only look at what we know about. They don't look at what we haven't encountered yet. The reason I say that, in today's landscape, there are viruses such as, when they do a ransomware attack, they use viruses that have a changing code. What I mean by that, the signature of the code changes. So if your antivirus is a traditional antivirus software and it's looking at signatures that have been brought up in the past, and the code has changed, the signature has changed, it won't recognize that new virus as a threat because it doesn't have a signature on file that matches it. Now, there are antiviruses, there are next-gen antiviruses that some companies use that not only look at the signatures that we know about, but they look at behavior. So if there's something that's strange, that happens on your system that's strange. So again, going back to you getting the email, if they click on the link and it redirects them to a website that's not a normal website that your company visits, let alone it may not be in your geographic region. So it could be a website that's coming out of India. The antivirus software will detect it and let you know this is not normal behavior. We should look into it. Now, everything's not perfect, so sometimes it may be something that's innocent and not non-threatening, but you want to have as much protection as possible. That way you won't risk getting into those situations where you've just had a breach and had a security breach of not only your information, but your client's information. Again, you'll see backup data regularly. And we're not saying back it up, do a full backup every day, but have a regular schedule for your backups. A lot of companies do a full backup once a week and incremental backups throughout the week. The reason being, a full backup takes quite a while to do, so you don't want to lose access to your system for that time. And that's why they do it on the weekends, because a lot of those companies don't work on the weekends, so they'll have downtime to do it. But the incremental backups are just in case something happens. And between the full backups, where you can actually recover a lot of your data. And that's going back to what we talked about ransomware. If somebody locks up your system, you have these backups that you can access and just reinstate your whole process. Of course, encrypting sensitive data, formal company policies regarding file and device disposal. You can't just throw away a device, because again, it has information that is stored on there. So there's ways that you have to go about getting disposing of the hard drive and different things like that, so you'll be able to protect against those breaches. Because if I find a random laptop and I'm a bad actor, of course I'm gonna look through the laptop to see if there's any remnants of what it was used for. Because if there is, I can use that information to my advantage. And again, cannot stress this enough, train everyone about cybersecurity. And they have to be fully certified where they can do all these different things like a cybersecurity expert is expected to do. What we're saying is educate them on the general process of cybersecurity, mainly how to be aware of different cyber attacks and different vulnerabilities, such as email phishing campaigns, and depending on the level of security you need for your business, it goes all the way out to who they allow to come into the building with them. If you notice federal buildings, you have to go in one by one. That's the level of security that they want. And that's because if an employee comes in and there's a bad actor outside that claims to be working that and new and I can be a bad actor and say, okay, I meet you going into the building. I tell you, oh, I'm new here. I didn't get my key card. Can you let me in? Because I don't want to look bad on my first day. It's human nature to try to be helpful, but you want your employees to be aware that can be more detrimental to your company than it can be helpful for that employee. So you want to make sure that they know what the policies are. If there's a new employee that doesn't have access to the building via key card, well, what's the policy? What do we do to facilitate them entering the building without opening ourselves up to vulnerability? And the easy way to do that is to train your employees to send those new people over to a security location. So basically, like if you have a security guard, an actual physical security guard on premise, they should be directed to them so that the security guard can get everything cleared up so they can let them in the building. Your employees shouldn't just give access to anybody that they don't know, claiming to be a new employee or anything of that nature. So the cybersecurity training comes into place. Because again, we can have all these great tools in place, but if one of your employees is not aware of the procedures and bypasses some of the functionality, you've just eliminated the value in those systems that we have in place. Now detect. We talked about securing the system. Now there's software, just like the next-gen antivirus software I talked about. There's software out there that's designed to monitor your system. So you want to monitor your computers, monitor any activities going in and out your systems. Definitely monitor your network. And again, there's security experts that can advise you on what software is best for you. But at the end of the day, you want to have something monitoring your system functionality and what's going on in your system. You want to make sure that you can check your network for unauthorized users, investigate any unusual activities on your network. And then, like I said, there's software that's designed for that. Intrusion detection software and intrusion prevention software. Those are the two main categories that we're talking about right now. And again, I don't want to spec particular software because we want to stay vendor neutral. But when you talk to a cybersecurity expert, definitely ask them about intrusion detection software and intrusion prevention software, and see what they have to offer to help you protect and mainly monitor your system so you can detect any unauthorized access. Now that's part of the layered security. So if a bad actor bypasses your initial security, that's part of the reason why you want the layer. So like I said, it'll slow them down. That way your detection software can identify them and you can proceed with getting them out your system, which goes into response. Do you have a response plan? What happens when you get attacked? What's the protocol? If you get ransomware, I talked about that earlier. If you get ransomware and you have backups in place that are not connected to the network, you have the framework for your response. Okay, we get ransom, everything is locked up. We remove these computers off the network. We take our backups. We put new computers on there, and we load up our backups and get back to work. In the meantime, with the bad systems, we'll give them to our security experts to do their forensics and go through the process with the insurance company to limit to mitigate the damage that was done. So, and these are three things to look at: notify anyone whose data is at risk, keep your business running, and contain attack. Those are the three things. Those are the three main questions that you want to answer with your basic plan, especially in the state of Louisiana. And I'll show you this a little later on. Notify anyone whose data is at risk. There is a state law saying that if you have a data breach, you have to let people know. That's why when the state got hit, city got hit, you kept hearing these announcements because it is state law that you have to let the public, mainly and more importantly, your clients know that you had a security breach. If you don't, that causes more problems. Business continuity plan is part of keeping your business running, so that's part of what happens after the attack. And how do you contain the attack? What's the procedure for your employees? Do they turn off the system? Do they disconnect from the network? What's the procedure to contain the attack? Just like we're trying to do with COVID-19, develop a procedure to contain that virus from spreading throughout the country. Same thing with your network. You want to make sure you don't allow any malware or viruses to spread throughout your system. Additionally, notify law enforcement, update cybersecurity policy and plan with lessons learned. And I mentioned this before, no plan is going to be perfect, but you want to have a solid framework. Just like your business plan itself is a growing document, your cybersecurity policy and plan should be ever-growing document, because hackers and bad actors are always learning, always developing new techniques. So you want to make sure you stay up to date on your policy and plans to defend against those techniques. And prepare for inadvertent events. This is definitely something that a lot of us should have looked at many months ago before COVID-19 happened. I have floods and hurricanes in this slide because, of course, I'm in New Orleans, and that's one of our main concerns is floods and hurricanes. But with COVID-19 coming into play, that's an inadvertent event. This is an event that we did not know about, we weren't expecting, but it's very disruptive to not just our business, but to the whole economy. So going forward, we want to look at how can we better prepare ourselves for these circumstances. And that's going back to making sure you have your business continuity plan. You're making sure that you know what happens if you have to change over from a brick and mortar location to a remote workforce. How do you stay in touch with your employees? How do you stay in touch with your clients? What are these that you look at? And some of these things will blend in from your cybersecurity standpoint over to other areas of business, such as communications, marketing, and sales, because a lot of things are so interconnected into technology that you have to make sure that you're not just letting it fall by the wayside. You have to incorporate the idea of how we'll use technology into these different facets because we're already using it. Now, I mentioned before that there's a Louisiana state law, and I'm actually gonna put this up on YouTube later on, this video on YouTube later on, so you can see it. But this is the actual Louisiana data breach notification law, and it basically says if you have a data breach, you have to let people know. It was initially signed back in July of 2005, became effective in January 2006. So it's been in place for a while. But as our area grows in technology, you'll see it pop up more and more. So if there are data breaches, you'll start seeing more announcements. You'll be getting more information in the mail. Like when who was that? Like one, I'm trying to think which bank got hacked a while back. It wasn't isolated to this state, but they did let everybody know. And even though that's more of a nationwide situation, it's still something that they do nowadays to let everybody know you've been breached. We've been breached. Information may be at risk. Please update your passwords and check your credit and everything like that to make sure that you are not affected by the breach. But again, I'll put this up on YouTube, and you'll see the link at the bottom if you want to take a look further into how to deal with data breaches as far as with the laws in Louisiana. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I want to put that disclaimer out there. So I do recommend that you consult a lawyer And I definitely recommend you consult a security company that specializes in cybersecurity insurance, because they'll be able to better help guide you through these policies and procedures. Now, recovery connects back to your business continuity plan, which you'll do after the attack. Basically, you want to see how you can go about repairing and restoring the equipment and keeping employees and customers informed. We've kind of touched on this already, that you have to do it, but you want to make sure you have the right communications channels in place. So a lot of companies right now, for their employees, they're using Microsoft Teams, which helps them talk back and forth with their employees. As far as communicating with customers, a lot of companies I've seen doing a lot of email, they're more active on social media now. Their sales departments are doing a lot of phone calls, and it's not sales phone calls, it's more outreach phone calls. How you doing? This is what's going on, so on and so forth. It's just, this is part of staying in business, and that's keeping in touch with your clients and your employees. And as far as repair and restoration of affected equipment, part of that is going to fall into the insurance bucket if you have cybersecurity insurance. Other part is going to fall into your rainy day fund. You want to have a rainy day fund, and this goes back to when we talked about identifying your equipment and your software that you're using. If something happens, if you have to replace your equipment, it's a lot easier if you have a list of equipment and software and everything that you're currently using, because you can just take that list and see what you have to replace, rather than going to each station and seeing, okay, this computer's down, okay, this is for sales. Now, what does sales have? And you have to interview all these people to find out what tools they were using on their computer. Whereas, again, if you have that list in place, you can just go take that list and say, okay, these are the computers that were affected, these are the ones we have to replace, and these are the software and systems that they were using. So we can just go back in and replace it. It reduces the amount of time that your business will be, for lack of a better term, out of business. You want to get back to business as soon as possible. So if you have these things in place, again, you can pull that list, look at the equipment, and start replacing that equipment efficiently and effectively. Now, in some cases, and it works in other ways as well. So we usually replace computers every 5-6 years, give or take. And it helps you keep track of which ones are the oldest, which ones are the newest. That way, even if there's not a cyber attack or a breach or anything like that, it's just you just want to see what computers you need to look at replacing, anything like that. Again, you have this list saying, okay, these computers on these departments, they were bought on this date, so they are up for replacement. And then once you replace them, you have the list of software that you're using for each department on each computer. Just pull and add to that computer, and it'll create a seamless transition. And that's one of the things you want to look at. I think I mentioned this before. Cybersecurity is not just digital. We look at physical security too. So physical security with things like storing them, taking equipment and files and storing them securely, like file cabinets. If you have a server on premise, we recommend putting that into a closet with a lock on the door, which goes into limit physical access. Put a lock on the door for any servers that you have, and only allow necessary personnel to go into that room. So it'll mainly be your IT professionals. A lot of times it'll be just a network administrator versus the techs. If the techs have to go in there, of course, the administrator should be aware of it. And like I said, only people that should have access to the closet need to have access to the closet. If you're not a high-level manager that may need access to it, and if you don't work in the IT department, you should not have access to the system. Set reminders to your employees. Where I definitely hop on employee awareness. So set reminders of things that they should be doing, procedures, making sure that they're locking up sensitive documents, making sure that they're saving files in the right folders so that you can do the right backups. Again, in the beginning, I said we recommend not saving anything on the computer itself, but on a separate hard drive that can be disconnected from the computer. And you can have a system set up where they take the information from that hard drive and back it up to another system. And of course, keep stock. That's keeping stock of equipment and anything like that that may be that may be of use to bad actors and that has value. And there's more protection. And that's going back to your passwords, multi-factor authentication, encryption. You want to make sure these things are in place to protect your systems. Now, some things that I know a lot of people don't do is like shred documents. When you're disposing of documents or anything, just like if you dispose of equipment, you want to make sure you dispose of documents properly too. Recommend shredding documents, erase data correctly. Just because you hit delete on data doesn't mean it's not there anymore. Sometimes it goes into your recycle bin, which of course you have to empty that every once in a while. But also, and this is something that a lot of computer experts know, a lot of that information, if you delete it, remnants of it are still there until the system rewrites over that location. What I mean by that is if you've ever done this, and I know I've done this as a child, looked at a notepad that somebody wrote on and then took a piece of paper, laid it on top of it, and took a pencil and slid and used the graphite, sliding back and forth on it. Sometimes, depending on how hard the person who used that notepad wrote, you can actually use that graphite and that paper on top of that notepad and see what they wrote by sliding it back and forth across it, if you understand what I'm saying. So with that concept in mind, there's still remnants in there, and there's ways that that information can be deleted, but that's also leads back to what we were talking about earlier as far as the proper way to dispose of computers. I know companies that before they dispose of computers, they actually put holes in the hard drive. Putting holes in the hard drive makes it harder for anybody to pull information if you put it in the right spot. But again, I recommend consulting your security expert. That way you'll know what the procedures are for your organization. But you want to make sure you get rid of that data properly. And you'll see the other things that we've been talking about before: promoting security best practices in all locations, and know the response plan. Knowing a response plan, that should be part of the training, and you should have initial training for your employees when it comes to cybersecurity, and you should have periodic training. There's different levels of training that you can do. There's some organizations that they do a yearly training, which is a full awareness training, and there's other organizations that utilize learning platforms on top of that to give their employees a way to learn a little bit more of what to look for. They'll get little small 5-10 minute lessons on current things to look for, especially like in social media, emails, phone scams and stuff like that. They'll get these weekly or monthly, however it's set up, and they can take these to stay abreast. And if you have it set up properly, you can see who's taking these tests. And some of the systems have controlled phishing attacks, and we'll get into phishing attacks later, but those are those email scams where we can send out controlled phishing attacks and see who actually clicks on it or who does the proper procedures as far as cybersecurity awareness. And that's just, it helps train your employees, but also gives you a better peace of mind that you know, by letting you know that your employees are trained on cybersecurity awareness and best practices, which again reduces actually the risk of any breaches. So we'll go into another video from the FTC. This is on ransomware. The reason why I put this particular video in there is because ransomware is so prevalent nowadays that it's something that we should look at. So I'm gonna go ahead and let the video play now.
You get an urgent email at work, maybe from HR or your company's CEO. You open it, click on the link, and you're locked out of the system, along with the rest of your company. That's a ransomware attack. That link downloaded software that's holding your business data hostage. Now you're being asked for money to get your system back. Ransomware can take a serious toll on your business, and your customers won't be happy that their information is in criminal hands. So how do you protect your business against ransomware? Start with a plan. Make sure your business data is backed up outside your network. Teach everyone at your place of work how to spot ransomware. And always install the latest software patches and security updates. But what if you're attacked? Now is time to implement that plan. First, disconnect the infected devices from your network right away. This might limit the damage. Then, contact the authorities, like your local FBI office. Paying the ransom is up to you, but law enforcement doesn't recommend it, and you might not get your data back. The best defense against cyber threats is an informed workforce. Share this video with others in your workplace. Learn more at ftc.gov/smallbusiness.
Okay, so that was just like a brief snippet on ransomware. Like you're in the video, it's not recommended that you pay the ransom, and there's a reason behind that. The reason behind us not recommending that you pay the ransom is because you have no clue if the person who's ransoming your information will actually unlock your system for you. And there have been instances where organizations paid the ransom and never got access to the system again. So they were not only out the information, but they were also out the money that they spent, which created more problems for them because, again, going back, they had to let people know that they were breached. And as things progressed, their reputation just took a hit. So that's one of the biggest threats when you get breached is losing your reputation for security and privacy. If you don't have a good reputation, your clients can't trust you, it becomes very hard for you to operate. Now I'm gonna go through these pretty quickly because I know I'm running out of time. And I don't want to prolong it too much. But as you see, ransomware. And this is basically how the attacks start: scam emails, affected websites, server vulnerabilities, and online ads. They do a lot of social engineering. That's basically sending out emails and creating these messages to get you to react. So they'll use those to their advantage. That's why we say your employees are your most vulnerable area of your business when it comes to cyber attacks. Again, basically, what we talked about before, you need to have a plan, you need to back up your data, keep your security up to date, and alert your staff. If an attack happens, you limit the damage, contact the authorities. I put that twice because it's that important that you contact the authorities and you notify your customers. Part of the reason why it's important to notify your authorities, not just to let them know, but also to let them help get you through the process. We're not just talking about law enforcement, also contact insurance companies, anything like that you have in place. to keep, and this is to help keep your business running. So the question is, should you pay the ransom? And as we saw in the video, the answer is no. You don't recommend you paying your ransom. We're not saying that you can't. At the end of the day, that is up to you, but we do not recommend paying a ransom. We recommend that you have your backups and everything else in place as a precautionary measure, just in case you do get ransomware. That way you won't have to lose out on information and your Now we mentioned phishing. Phishing attacks, you see the fraudulent practice of sending emails purporting to be from reputable companies. Basically, phishing attacks, they send out mass emails to see who's going to bite and respond to this email. It can be an email about winning a trip. It could be an email about it can be an email saying that that the person works at the company, they're going into a presentation and they don't have access to the system. Can they use your password? It's all kind of things that attackers use in phishing emails to get you to disclose your passwords, credit cards, and things like that. One of the things to look out for is if there's a time limit on your response to the emails, and these are for unsolicited emails. If they say, oh, I need you to respond in the next 30 minutes or hour or something like that, if they're putting that pressure on you, it's a high chance that it's a scam. Because that's part of the thing that they want to do in social engineering. They want to get you off balance by creating that urgency, so that you don't have time to think that, oh, maybe this might not be the best option for me, or maybe this may not be the best thing to do, or or even they don't want you to consult with anybody. That way they can get your information that much quicker. So basically, you get an email or text, and it looks real, it's urgent. So what happens next, basically, if you click on it, if you download it, you click on the link, if you download the malware, it affects your system. If you don't and you're aware of the situation, you can go into your protocols. And of course, the ultimate thing is deleting the email, but you want to make sure that the email is either real or fake. Now, one of the things we do like to mention is if it comes from somebody that you know, but you're not sure about the email, like we'll see emails that's listed as somebody that we know, and it says, oh, I forgot to send you this. It is something that you never asked for. Don't click on the link. Pick up the phone and call that person and see if they sent that email. So if they did send that email, then you'll know, then you'll be able to verify that that email is something that you need to look at. If they didn't send that email, you'll know that that's something that you need to be aware, be wary of. So as you see, recurring themes: back up your data, keep your security up to date, alert your staff, and deploy a safety net. Now, alerting the staff to the phishing email, that's important because if you have a phishing email, there's a high probability it went to a number of people in the company, so you want to make sure that they're aware that that email should not be touched. It just goes into the email imposters. Same thing with it's basically phishing is just different ways of doing it. Email authentication. Again, keep your security system up to date and train your staff. There's tech support scams, does the same thing. They'll pretend to be tech support, sending emails, pop-up phone calls. Vendor security, we did mention that earlier. You want to make sure if you're a vendor for somebody that you have the right protocols in place, but also if you hire a vendor and give them access to your data, you want to make sure that you have the right connection in place, a secure connection between you and your vendor. Make sure make sure you verify their compliance with the procedures. Make sure you have all the policies outlined and written. written, and if there's any changes that need to be made, make sure that you don't only make the changes, but you make sure everybody is aware of all the changes. So one of the things you'll see, one of the underlying things you'll see in here is communication. Communication is key in making sure your security works properly. Because again, we can have all these things in place, like controlled access, multi-factor authentication. But if your employees aren't aware and aren't trained, a lot of this stuff can get bypassed very easily and inadvertently by your internal users, which creates an internal threat. Now, this is what I wanted to get to, cybersecurity insurance. There is cyber insurance available. And basically things it does is helps you recover after a cyber attack. So, because that can be costly, it can help cover some of the costs, and they help make sure that your policies have the right coverage for your policies. So basically, they help make sure that you are protected the best way possible, so you can shift that risk from yourself over to the insurance company. There's different coverage types. There's first-party coverage, third-party coverage. First-party coverage, of course, is your coverage. Third-party coverage protects you from liability if a third party brings claim against you. So basically, if there's a breach and it may not be directly caused by you, but you're part of the infrastructure, so you're a vendor or the vendor, or you have a vendor who's been breached and a third party holds you responsible, there's different coverages for that. But of course, contact the insurance company, talk to them directly, because they can get into more detail about it. My purpose right now is to make sure that you're aware that these coverages are available. And if you have business insurance, I would start with the company that you have business insurance with to see if they offer cyber insurance. And I'm not going to go into too much in this because it's just really going back into what we talked about before. Making sure you have the right authentication. If you hire a web host, some of the things that you should look at, the transport-led security, that's just the security between, and this gets more into technical details that we need to right now, but it's just, basically it's communication security. There's and they'll understand what you mean by transport-led security, or TLS. Email authentication, software updates, website management. A lot of this stuff is like very repetitive, but it's repetitive for a reason. Now, the last thing I want to touch on before we close out is secure remote access. This is very important right now because we have a lot of remote workforces. So these are a few things that we recommend that you look at as far as securing remote access. Change all preset router passwords and default names. A lot of people just take routers and different equipment like that and just set it up, not realizing that you need to change the username and password on these routers, modems, anything that has defaults. Make sure you change the default name and password. Part of the reason is because if you go online, you can actually look up a lot of default names and passwords online. So to give you an example, Cisco creates a router, an enterprise router that a lot of organizations use. Now, the problem comes in is if you take that router out the box and never change the username and password, because everybody knows that generic username and password. The generic username and password on Cisco devices is normally Cisco and Cisco. It's just a company name. So if you leave that as a username and password, a bad actor you just made it easy for a bad actor to just say, okay, I'm getting into your system. So you want to make sure you change those usernames and passwords, especially on a router since you'll be doing remote access. Enable full disk encryption for laptops and mobile devices. because if they're remoting into your system, you don't want to give the bad actors a way to follow them in. So that encryption creates that unreadable code unless you have that encryption key. It creates that unreadable code for anybody on the outside. So it creates that another level of security. Another level of security, of course, is antivirus software. Make sure it's up to date. I definitely recommend the next gen software, but if you want to do traditional antivirus software, that's perfectly fine. Just make sure it's up to date. Disable automatic public Wi-Fi connections. You don't want the equipment used for company purposes to automatically connect to a public Wi-Fi, because again, that's creating a vulnerability. That's creating a way for bad actors to access that device, because the signal's going out into the air for another device to capture. And if I have a device that can capture signals from the air, just pull it out the air, that just makes a vulnerability for you, because I can just pull the information that you're looking at. Of course, unless you have some of these things in place like encryption. Now, speaking of that, the last thing we talked about is using a VPN, a virtual private network, which helps encrypt your connections to make them secure. So that way, in the scenario that we're in right now, that everybody's doing remote work, if they're utilizing VPNs that specifically connects to your office, and the VPN is usually connected to your firewall, your router, inside the router, if it's connected, your system will have the decryption code, and of course the device that's connected will have the decryption code. But that creates that secure connection so they can remote in without opening your company up to different vulnerabilities. And there's other things that we can go into that's a little bit deeper as far as creating that secure levels of access as well, because there's a way to adjust your system from an internal network to a network that's accessed remotely, limiting your sales department to only have access to your sales department documents. Your human resources department have access to only human resources documents, and so on and so forth. So there's things like that you want to start building out in your plan as far as your workforce, especially if you're going to continue with a remote workforce, to make sure it's secure while still giving access to the needed information that your team needs. So that's it. That's all I have for now. Definitely, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Again, I'm putting this on YouTube. You will have contact information so that you can reach out to myself or anybody in the SCORE network to find out more about how to protect your business and how to operate during COVID-19 and going forward, if you want to continue to have a remote workforce, or if you just want updates on how to save systems, we'll definitely here to help.